Good morning.
Morning or afternoon, depending on where you all are. Good morning, Jacqueline. If you guys would like to say hello in the chat box, make sure that you change the drop down to all panelists and attendees before you send your message so that everybody sees it.
Good morning, Helen. We'll just give a few minutes here to let everyone get signed in. But thank you all for joining us from across the country and world.
Looks like we've got a question in our Q&A here. Thank you, Samantha, for answering that.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it went to everyone or not.
Let me see. So Karen asked if there's a handout that we can print. We don't have a handout, but we will share some resources later, and this webinar is going to be recorded, and we'll be putting it up on our YouTube page and on our website. Oh, we have someone from Flint, Michigan. Hello. Texas, Hawaii, Canada, Colorado.
Oh, sunny Palm Springs. Sounds warm down there. It's a little chilly up here in Washington this morning.
All right, well, I'm gonna go ahead and get us started. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our webinar this morning. My name is Katie Hess, and I am the chair of the Registrars Committee Western Region. We are one of several nonprofit regional organizations operating under the Collections Stewardship Professional Network of AAM, and we represent registrars and collections professionals in 9 states in the Western US. This webinar is the first in a hopefully monthly series we'll be holding through 2021 called Hands-On, Practical Conservation for the Collections Professional. We're working with conservators from all over our region to present step-by-step demonstrations of some practical basic conservation techniques that you can apply to your own collection, such as basic housing, stabilizing, and cleaning of different art and artifacts, and also to give you the tools to determine when it is time to call in a professional conservator. I hope that you all find today's webinar helpful. And with that, I'll pass it over to my Vice Chair, Beth Sanders, to kick us off.
Good morning, afternoon, evening, depending on where in the world you are. And it is amazing to see how many people we have here today. I see already 125 attendees. So thank you all so much for joining us for this first webinar. Our sponsor today for this webinar is Artwork Fine Art Services with offices in Portland and Seattle. Be sure to speak with them for your upcoming shipping, packing, storage, and installation needs. And a big thank you to Artwork Fine Art Services for being a Tier 1 sponsor of RCWR. Today we are extremely fortunate to have Samantha Springer, Principal Conservator for Art Solutions Lab, here with us. Samantha established Art Solutions Lab, a cultural heritage and fine art conservation practice in Portland, Oregon in 2020. She provides collections care, courier, display mount, and treatment services for sculpture and variable art to regional arts and cultural organizations, artists, and private collectors. Her practice grows from a foundation of work with institutions with broad fine art collections, such as the Portland Art Museum and the Cleveland Museum of Art, as well as organizations with collections that focus on anthropological material, such as the Field Museum in Chicago, and specific regions or peoples, such as the Alaska State Museums and National Museum of the American Indian. While Samantha remains a generalist due to the nature of her job, she has a particular interest in preventative conservation, sustainability, and working with living artists and cultural representatives as a means towards preserving less tangible aspects of artwork, such as artist intent. Today, Samantha will be speaking with us about the benefits of using condition and conservation surveys to figure out where to start when caring for our cultural heritage collections. Before we get started, just a few logistics since we are on Zoom. We are here in the webinar format. We can't see you despite the fact that you can see us, so you're comfortable in your pajamas, you stay that way, make funny faces, enjoy yourself. If you want to talk to any of us, the panelists, or the other attendees, please do use the chat function. We have people saying hello from all over, including my colleague Lorraine Scott from the Naval Undersea Museum. Hi, Lorraine. But so use that to speak to each other throughout the event, throughout the presentation. But if you have specific questions, please put them in the Q&A feature. We will address those questions as they come in if they need to be addressed immediately. Otherwise, we have time at the end of the presentation to go through our questions about things we heard today, Samantha's comments, and things related to our collections and our future conditions and conservation surveys. So without further ado, I am going to stop sharing my screen and turn it over to Samantha. Thank you so much for being here with us.
Of course, I forgot to unmute myself. Thank you so much for having me this morning. And it's so nice to see so many people from all over the place. And so I am actually going to start by getting to know all of you who I'm talking to this morning. So Beth, if you wouldn't mind putting those poll questions up, that would be great. So yeah, just to get started, if you could answer about what your role is at your organization, or maybe how you identify professionally, that would be great. And I'm also asking if you've ever carried out a collection specific or item level survey before. Has your organization had a needs assessment survey? And if so, did you get a written report, or have you put together a written report from that needs assessment? And then finally, the last question is, I'm wondering if you know if there's a difference between a condition survey and a conservation survey. So this will just help me know who I'm talking to and make sure that I give you appropriate information. So I'll just give you a few minutes to answer. Or maybe not a few minutes, but a minute or so.
We have just about 90, coming up on 100 people who have voted already, so
okay,
a few more seconds. Okay, we have 111, 112, final chance to get your votes in. Give it the 10 seconds. Okay, and I'll end the poll
Okay, great.
and share those results.
Okay, so looks like most people here attending, we've got, 30 plus 38%, so like more than 2/3 identifying as a registrar or collections manager, and kind of maybe about half and half having carried out a collection specific survey before. That's great. So hopefully this will be a nice review, and I'll be able to give you some tips for making your survey successful in the future. And just over 40% having carried out a needs assessment survey. So I will go over that a little bit. And of those people, well, I guess I didn't ask if you have had a needs assessment, have you had a written report? So I'm not sure. Oh, well, it looks like about the same number have answered both of those questions. So of those people who have had a needs assessment, looks like most of them also have a written report from that. And 2/3, more than 2/3, 3/4 of our attendees are saying that there is a difference, and if they didn't say yes, then they're not sure. So we are going to go over that a little bit during the webinar today, and talk about what those differences are, because it's slight, but there is a difference. Okay, so I'm going to start sharing my screen, so we'll get started with the presentation portion. So thanks everyone for answering those questions. So there's a nice view of a pretty organized storage area, which should make everybody feel at home. And I'll start by going over just kind of table of contents, give you an idea of what we're going to talk about today. So I will start with the basics just to define what I'm talking about today, to get us all on the same page. Set out the benefits and drawbacks to help you decide if this is something that you want to take on. We'll dive into more detail and talk about planning and the types of surveys that are possible to carry out. And if you are ready to take the plunge, what kind of assessment you might want to accomplish. So we'll finish up with the webinar talking about the practicalities and logistics of assessments and to set you on the road to success. So starting at the beginning, what is a survey? So I'm sure you have all filled out a survey before, whether it was providing feedback about a service that you received, some questions on Facebook that your friend posted to find out maybe which Hogwarts house you best fit into, a marketing poll to find out about your experience with the product, or even on your own registrar's listserv, the collections manager listserv, to find out what webinar you would most like to attend. So filling out a poll is usually easy and straightforward, but not many of us, or not all of us, have actually created a survey. And so I'm going to talk about how could a survey be related to collections. So just getting our definitions down so we are all on the same page. A survey is a systematic approach to collecting information. So today I'll talk about writing a survey to find out more about your collection and using a methodical approach that's geared towards data and its use. So why go to all the hassle? So many of us go into work and we have been figuring out for years what to do and what comes next without ever having carried out a survey before, although it's nice to see that like 2/3 of you have done this before. So why would you even want to do this? What is the benefit of taking the time to carry out a survey? Well, there's more than one benefit, And some of us are overwhelmed with the thought of trying to figure out what to do next when we're approaching collections care kind of comprehensively, or where to have the biggest impact or bang for your buck. So the number one reason to carry out a collection survey is to get an overall snapshot of the health of your collection or organization. So we all have limits to our resources. So when you are staring into storage or trying to determine what is going on with one part of your collection, carrying out a survey is a great place to start to figure out where to put your effort. Number two, survey data allows you to make informed decisions and is really the first step towards crafting a preservation plan. So by having structured and systematically collected information, you can then make informed decisions, and depending on how comprehensive your assessment is, you can write a preservation plan. So a preservation plan typically outlines action steps to be taken after the assessment. And those steps might be something like carrying out treatment, working on rehousing, or improving your environmental stability. A preservation plan provides a timeline and sets out a path towards comprehensively preserving your collection. Third, a collection survey allows you to set priorities. Priorities can be numerical and graphed when you have that information collected from a survey, and it will allow for easy visualization of where general and specific needs are. Finally, survey information is extremely useful in fundraising and grant writing. This and maybe should be number one for many of us. But in fact, if you are writing a grant to ask for money towards collection care or treatment, you will most likely be asked by that granting organization if you have carried out a needs assessment or organization-wide survey, when it was carried out, and if you have taken any steps towards the needs that were identified from that assessment. Oops. Okay, so how do you use the information how can you use the information that you've gathered from the survey process? So needs can be part of a forward planning process. Data can be used to develop grant or project funding applications, as I mentioned. And in fact, the information may help you determine which grants to even apply for or help you formulate projects that will be appealing to granting agencies. You may know from your day-to-day work where the needs are and what projects you would like to proceed with. But having survey data can help you make a stronger case for additional resources from your governing body or just from your supervisor. Carrying out periodic surveys can also show growth and clearly display improvements, especially if you can show how they tie into changes made as a result of the work that you carried out and the needs that were identified through the assessment. The information can also be used to highlight the importance of collection care within an institution and help you get buy-in from your board, your supervisor, or other departments. Okay, so with all of these benefits, who doesn't want to get started? Well, there are some drawbacks or maybe some impediments to what might prevent you from getting started. So I just want to identify a few of those so that we can all go into this with a clear vision of what we're doing. So the data that's collected from a survey is really only as good as the questions that you ask and how the information is collected. So you don't want to get started without preparation so that you get bad data or useless information. Surveys are really only a snapshot at one moment in time. The information will expire over time and no longer provide an accurate assessment. However, as I said before, periodic surveys can help you show improvements or even stagnation. So it's kind of like an annual review. I mean, you don't have to do a survey every year, but that's one way to compare it. Comparable data also provides you with even more information and can strengthen your case for getting funds to go towards collections care. Surveys can be shallow in detail, depending on the size of collection surveyed and the amount of time that you have dedicated to it. So typically we want to complete the assessment within a really specific time period. And the amount of time that you have defines the depth of information that you can collect. So good planning, again, is essential for survey success. So if you don't have the time to put into planning your survey, or you can't maintain organization and consistency throughout your assessment, it may not be worthwhile to get started. So I'll talk about planning a little bit. So I will assume that you have weighed the pros and cons and decided to go forward with your assessment survey. So now you have to start planning. We'll get into the types of surveys that you might want to carry out, but all of them will require a really similar planning process. You will need to decide who will carry out the survey. Besides the person developing the survey and collecting the information, you may need help from other staff, for example, accessing and moving objects around. Or you may need assistance getting information about your building envelope, so the facilities department. Environmental data is also something that you might not have collected yourself, or possibly getting in touch with your security officers to better understand security procedures. You will need to set aside time for the survey. Assessments are typically projects outside of your normal day-to-day work, and the amount of time that you want to set aside for the survey will depend, or the amount of time that's needed will depend on the size of the collection that you want to assess. And this leads us to defining the scope of your project. So deciding what answers you want ahead of time. If you establish a goal or goals and your desired outcome, it will help you establish what questions to ask or what data to collect in the survey. For example, perhaps you want to know how much of your collection and which objects need treatment. Then on your survey form, you need to have a question to answer, does this object need treatment? It's really as simple as that. So, or perhaps you want to know the greatest risks to your collection. Then you need to go through a list of risks, rate them in reference to your organization or collection, and determine if you have any protections in place to mitigate these risks. So now we are ready to talk about the different types of surveys that you might be able to carry out. The type of survey that you carry out directly relates to your goal. So in relation to collections, there are generally 3 types of surveys: condition survey, conservation survey, and an organization-wide survey, or also known as a needs assessment. So condition surveys will help you provide information about preventive care. Conservation assessments will help you understand where conservation treatment is needed. And a needs assessment will allow you to see broad risks that are a threat to your organization. You can also carry out a kind of defining a few of these, or some of these categories can be split even further. And you can also carry out a building survey. which would be a type of needs assessment. And this can help you identify building-specific risks. Some might even consider this to be a survey for hazard identification. Condition and conservation surveys can be your whole entire collections, or they can be collection specific. So in other words, you look at just a small part of your entire collection. And this can also be called an item level survey. Okay, so, excuse me. I have a few examples of what survey forms look like and the type of information that you might want to collect. So for condition surveys, we're going to start there. You will want to know who examined the object, the date, and tie basic object information like the accession number, title, artist, or other identifying information to the data that you collect. So this is a time to, carrying out a condition survey can also be a time to clean up the information in your database, which I know many of you will be happy to be a part of. You may want to confirm the material that the object is made out of. And finally, you will want to note the condition and a priority. So priorities can be defined as, maybe it's a high priority object because it is actively getting damaged due to poor housing. So the priority is high for it to get some action tied to it. Or perhaps the priority is high because the object itself is just in poor condition on its own. A conservation survey typically collects not only information about the existing condition, but whether or not the object needs treatment. So additional questions that might be asked are what kind of treatment, and possibly even estimating how long the treatment might take. So here I'm showing you an example of a spreadsheet with data that was collected from a survey that I carried out with help, but on photographs in the Northwest Art Collection at the Portland Art Museum. So I'm going to show you the form that we use for collecting this information, and hopefully this works. Okay, so that opened, but I'm going to show you. Okay. So now I hope that you can see this screen. It's on my web browser, and it is a Google form. And so you can see that Google form we used, and it was extremely helpful in collecting our data electronically. And so I'm just going to go through the parts of the form so you can get a better idea of how we collected this information. So here you can also, maybe many of you have created a Google form before, some of you haven't seen this, but you can make certain questions required. So here we definitely need, to put in a number. You can collect the artist information and title here, and it will be tied into the answer that you get. And for this photo survey that we carried out, we also wanted to identify the process, the printing process that was used for the photograph. By selecting one of those choices, it takes us to another drop-down menu. So I can choose between different types of black and white printing processes, or excuse me, these were non-metallic printing processes. So we'll go to next, oops, sorry, that was a mistake in our form. So say I'm looking at a daguerreotype, and so after we go through this answering process, it will take us to notes and conditions, or additional notes on the process and condition. So we don't actually look through all of the different printing processes. So with Google Forms, you can have your user follow a certain trajectory that you can define. So the notes that we wanted to collect that were related to process, we wanted to know if hand coloring was applied, and so we could check it or not, depending on that answer. We also entered a descriptive information about the medium, so that it was more than just the process, but we would collect information about the paper that was used, there were coatings, that kind of thing. And then maybe one of the most important pieces of information was choosing the condition that the object was in, and then adding additional notes. And this was based on how the database that we were using structured information. We wanted to know if there were accessories in housing, and then what condition those housings were in. Okay, I'm going to go to the next page. Then we collected information about the condition of the support. And you can see that it was defined by minor, moderate, or major, and each different type of kind of condition issue was listed. We also wanted to know the location of those conditions. And by having all this, collecting it in this form, it made it really quick and easy for us to collect the data. So if you were handwriting or needing to rewrite all of these words each time, that would definitely take more time and make your survey process less efficient. We looked at the media and surface condition and collected it in the same way. So if the condition was minor, moderate, or major, and then the location of any conditions that we noted. We divided the secondary support from the object itself. And I'm just going to scroll through this really quickly. Sorry if I'm giving you whiplash. And then also, since conservators were involved in this survey process and we felt confident being able to collect this information, we also collected information on the conservation priority, whether or not the object needed treatment, and then how long the treatment was anticipated and what types of treatment might be needed, and then gave also recommendations for storage temperature. So for photographs, you know, they can last a lot longer if they're in cool or cold storage, and this provided us a way to give recommendations for whether or not storage should be dark or lit storage was fine, if additional storage enclosures were needed, and whether or not the object itself was sensitive to alkali, so if buffered or unbuffered storage materials, and then what those treatments were that were needed. So you can see that this was a pretty comprehensive survey form. I'm going to go back to my PowerPoint now. And so on the right here, you can see this is how the data was collected. I apologize, it's really small since there was so much information that we were collecting. But one of the things to highlight is that the information was time-stamped, and so we knew you didn't have to enter the date yourself. It was collected automatically. Collecting the data on a Google form also allowed for live updating of the progress, and multiple people could input information at the same time. Additionally, with a little Google searching, you can find out ways to pre-fill entries on the form, such as the object number or the person carrying out carrying out that condition assessment, in order to save time and make your survey process more efficient. So to make the information that you collect from this type of survey, you really need to think about the expertise that you have on hand or on staff and structure it to the strengths that you have. So because of the staff that we had carrying out the survey and the training that we did prior to the survey, we were really able to go into a lot of depth. And we set aside a lot of time. We actually hired a fellow to help with carrying out the survey, and she did most of the work. It's not something that we could have taken on with our existing staff. So just to highlight that you don't want to ask questions on your survey form that you cannot answer. So if you don't have access to a conservator to determine the potential cost for a treatment, you might want to stick with just documenting the existing condition or its potential needs, like rehousing. At the end, you should be able to know how many objects are in good condition versus poor, which parts of the collection are in better condition, and where future efforts might go to improve the situation. Also, you can identify or define the curatorial priority of objects that are in poor versus good condition. So the last survey form that I'm going to show you is an example that shows assessment rankings. So here you can see that there's a ranking for various different categories: collection importance, suitability for exhibition, condition, and conservation need. So each ranking has a very clear definition, so I really like this form. And so that the assessor can determine which category it should fit into. So a lot of times we see on condition, even on our own, not just survey forms, but kind of condition, when we're doing a condition assessment on a single object, condition is broken down into excellent, good, deep, poor, but we don't have definitions for these terms. And I think it's a really great way to help the assessor identify, what's the difference between good and fair, because on any given day you might feel a little differently and decide, oh, this one's good, this one's fair. But having those definitions can really help you clearly define when something goes between good and excellent or poor. In this example, there's 4 rankings for each category, but of course you can have more or less. So looking at these examples, I think it becomes more obvious why getting input from other people is important, and particularly curatorial input. So asking for input creates an access point for you to get buy-in. It's necessary to have input. So is it necessary to have input for every survey type? So I think it is always important to have curators or administrators included in the process. They can help define the scope and the goals of the project. They might not be participating in actually carrying out the survey, but finding out what they want to know from the survey will help you get buy-in. Condition information and conservation needs can help inform the work that curators do. It's it's really important for them to have this information too. It might lead to deaccessioning objects, or it can help curators determine the quality of object that they're looking for when they're acquiring new works. And curators, when they're asked, they can be really helpful in defining those questions that need to be asked. So now that we've looked at object or item-specific collections-oriented surveys, I want to talk about organizational assessments and building surveys. So these, as I mentioned before, are also known as needs assessments. So there are a number of resources that are available for carrying these out on your own, but there are also 2 programs that provide funding to bring in the expertise you need to fill them out if you don't feel comfortable carrying out a comprehensive needs assessment. So MAP and CAP, there's the Museum Assessment Program and the Collections Assessment Program. Each are intended to be carried out in a really short time frame and allow you to get a comprehensive or holistic view of your organization, where your risks are, and potentially provide steps to mitigating them. So an organization-wide assessment will have you review the following topics as they relate to collections care. So you will typically look at the policies that you have in place, your entire building, collection storage specifically. You might assess your digital assets and how they're being cared for, your housekeeping process, or gallery maintenance, handling and use of your collections, environmental monitoring and control, conservation needs. If you're in a library or archive, you might look at surrogate copies and new media, and also emergency preparedness. So as you can see, this is a really wide breadth of information that's being investigated. And a benefit that I didn't discuss earlier is that when you are assessing your entire organization, it requires you to get information from other people and departments, which I think is a benefit. You will not complete this kind of assessment on your own. So this is a really great way to start building relationships within your organization. And when we talk about risk factors and threats to the collection, these are specifically related to the 10 agents of deterioration. These were created by the CCI and they're available online. I believe that I put a link into the resources. And sometimes they're whittled down to the main 4. I can't remember. Oh, sorry, I didn't switch my slide here. So the main 4 are environment, radiation or light, and contaminants and deterioration, which include pests and microorganisms. But more comprehensively, you will look at all 10. So these include physical forces, thieves and vandals, fire, water, pests, pollutants, radiation or light, incorrect temperature, the incorrect relative humidity, and dissociation of information. Okay. Now that we have a really comprehensive look at the different types of surveys that there are, hopefully you are all ready to jump in and carry out a survey of your own. So what is the first step? So beyond taking the information that you've learned here and some tips that I'll present, kind of 3 main steps that you could take to get started. There are numerous online resources, particularly for needs assessments. And I will post a PDF of the resources that are available that I find most useful. And so these resources include documents, worksheets, and templates to follow, as well as background information about those agents of deterioration and how to assess them or figure out if they're a problem in your organization. You want to develop a realistic timetable, so not only for how long you will spend during the active assessment, but also when you want to start it and how long you want to take to sort through the data. You will want to define how you'll collect the information and what will be incorporated into your final report. So by how you will collect the information may be analog and on paper forms, or you may want to go the electronic route. And you can collect information directly into spreadsheets or into your database, or you may want to use the Google form that I showed. And of course, you want to define the stakeholders and get them involved. Okay, so we have come to the last section of my talk today, tips for success. So I have mentioned this before, but it bears repeating. Preparation is so important to this process. You cannot just jump in and think that you will get meaningful information from your survey. So part of that preparation may include using the worksheets that I mentioned to organize information about your collection. And other preparation questions you might ask yourself are how you will physically approach surveying the material. Will you do it by location, by storage location? Will you do it by material? And what will make it the most efficient for you? Maybe you have to proceed based on staff availability. For item level surveys, you can test your collections form on a subset of the collection to refine them. So you can think of this as a pilot survey. If you test out your forms and then try to process some of that data that you collected, you will really quickly see where you're missing pieces or where you're missing questions and not gathering information, and see where you need to reformat. So the pilot survey will also help you determine the amount of time that's needed. So if you pick a subset of 10 objects, you can figure out how much time you spent examining those works and each work by averaging the number based on how long it took you to survey those subset. So you can calculate from there how much time and it will take to assess the entire collection based on those numbers. You want to think about your workspace. So will you work in storage, or will you pull the objects out into a different space because there's better lighting? So the latter will obviously require assistance from more people and take more time rather than leaving things in place. So this leads us to getting your tools ahead of time. So do you need some sort of a mobile device or a clipboard to take with you as you move through storage to do your assessment? You will definitely need flashlights, measuring tape, pencils, paper for when your electronic device is not working, or maybe your Wi-Fi goes down, perhaps a loop or magnification, and photos. Take photos. Don't just take photos of the objects themselves or areas where you might want to make improvements on your building, but you also want to take pictures of yourself working during the survey to share for outreach, to share with your board or your supervisor to show them what the work looks like. Okay, set aside time for your survey, for carrying it out. So actually block those days off for the work to be carried out and schedule it into your calendar. Otherwise, this kind of work can really easily get pushed off and never get done. This is another reason why hiring someone to help can be useful, because it forces you to focus at that time that they are there to help you. Number 6, so you can collect information electronically. I highly recommend this if you are able to do it. Google Forms is a really great tool. So after you've collected data in the form, it can be transferred directly into a spreadsheet automatically for analysis. You can use the data to assess your progress, your survey progress in real time. And it will also help you make really eye-catching graphs for use in reports. Do not be afraid to seek help. Interns and work-study students can be particularly helpful for these types of projects. Maybe you're the one doing the assessment, but then your helper is actually putting the information into the computer or writing down and taking notes or taking photos. And finally, you want to get buy-in from your stakeholders. There are many examples of types of surveys that have been published, and you can use these to show your governing board or supervisor the importance of surveys and why your time and effort should be put in carrying them out. So if nothing else, they can help you get funding. The survey, that is, can help you get funding to carry out more beneficial, and this should help you get support. So that is the end of my presentation. I really want to thank everybody for their time today and attending, and we take time to answer some questions that have come up and any new questions as we, and I'm going to stop sharing screen.
We do have some questions that have come in. We have quite a few questions about your Google form.
Okay.
Admittedly, I also saw this and wrote down, would you be willing to share your Google form with us? There's a question that was asked by another attendee this morning. So is that something that you can share?
I'll edit it a little bit so that I think there's some like, sensitive information on it, just like removing the people's names. And so I think I have another survey form that, this is something I really like. So I have a couple of them, and I can share that. Maybe you can send it out in an email in your follow-up email, so I can share that with you, Beth.
That would be fantastic. We also have a question from Cole, wondering approximately how much time it took to create the Google form.
It does not take very much time. I think, putting that one together to start, it took, I don't know, less than an hour. But then, like, my first iteration looked really different from what I ended up with. So that particular form, we had hired a photo conservator to come in and do a workshop with us. And so we actually carried out a couple of, we did our pilot survey with her, and then refined the information that was on there.
Have you conducted conservation surveys that were successful using tools other than Google Forms? Why you like the Google form?
Yeah, definitely. When I started out in conservation, Google Forms did not exist, and the nice thing about it is that it directly transfers all of your information into a spreadsheet. So, early on, I would use spreadsheets, and there's ways to make drop-down menus in spreadsheets, so that can help speed up your data collection process. So that's a really great way to do it. And really, paper is king. Paper forms are totally useful and definitely a valid way of collecting information, and you can absolutely have success doing it that way. Obviously, it's going to take you longer to then transfer that information into some sort of electronic format for you to process the information, but it's absolutely a way to have a successful survey.
A few technical questions. One, are you able to attach pictures in the Google form? And also, can you access the form if you're not connected to the internet?
So yeah, actually, I've never tried accessing the form without being connected to the internet. I know that you can. That might be an issue. So I've actually never tried that. Actually, you know what? I think at one point during our survey, Wi-Fi was down, and that was an issue, and it wasn't updating at all. So that is a problem. So that would be a reason to, stick with a spreadsheet that you had created that, offline on your computer. And attaching images, yes, you can attach images. There's a weird thing about, if you have to be connected to the Google Drive. The images actually go into a Google Drive folder. And so you have to, it's really easy to get a Google account. So that shouldn't be that big of a problem, but there's, I've used forms to have other people input information, and if they don't have access to your Google Drive, then they can't add a photo, or there's a weird way of, you have to set it up correctly in order to get the photos added on.
With regard to the photographic collection that you're referencing for this survey, how large was the collection and how long did the survey take to complete?
Yeah, that's a great question. It took us 8 to 10 weeks to carry it out, and we had one person who was dedicated. She worked regular 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, doing that. And then there was another 2 of us, and who's maybe still on the call, we finished up a few of the objects that didn't get completed during that time. And there were, I'm going to get this number wrong, I think there were 2,000 photographs that we looked at.
If you have never done a survey, is it better to start at item level or entire collection but with less detail?
So if you personally have never done a survey, I think it's best to start wherever you feel most comfortable. So where do you, this is kind of going back to where your strengths are. So if you have the most experience looking at doing condition assessments for individual objects, then that's the place that you should start to get comfortable with it. But if you have more knowledge about, kind of organizational type of, or, about preventive care, then that might be your strength, and so you should start there. However, if your organization has never done a survey before, I really highly recommend doing a needs assessment, because really, you can get grants and funding by doing this kind of work. You can get money to help support you even doing the needs assessment to begin with. And if you don't have a good overview of kind of what the risks are to your overall organization, then doing an item level survey is not, it's useful, but it's not as useful as knowing like, hey, we have water pipes that need to be fixed. You can make such much bigger impact on the care of your collection by looking at your whole organization.
We got a couple questions here that ask if you're in the middle of your survey and you need to add more fields or ask more questions. Would you add to the existing form, start over, or use another form as a follow-up? What would your recommendation be?
With the forms, it's easy to add more and then just stick with your existing form. That's fine. It might make your Google Sheet look a little bit funky, but it just adds more columns onto the end. So that is not really an issue. I would say that if you're not using Google Forms and you're just in the middle of your survey and you realize, oh, there's this like important thing that I wasn't asking before, I guess it would really depend on how many objects you were looking at and how important that piece of information was. That is the reason that I really highly recommend doing your little pilot survey, because you don't want to get, 3,000 objects into your collection and then realize like, oh, I forgot to write down this really important piece of information and then have to go back and look at all of them again.
Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
We also received a question about on your spreadsheet, how the responses to the different conditions and levels show up since the screen was so small.
Oh, yeah. So if it's a drop down, whatever word you have in the drop down screen, that's the word that shows up in your spreadsheet. So that's another good reason to like do a subset or do your pilot survey, so then you can see how the information shows up. And I could give a whole talk on how to work with spreadsheets. So concatenation of your data in order to reformat it into like prose is something that's possible with the information or spreadsheet information, even if you don't have drop downs and you're not picking the words that you exactly want to show up on your sheet as your answer. If you just have numbers that show up in a particular column. So there's lots of ways. Once your data is in a spreadsheet, there's so many ways of playing around with it and making it, export to or come out the way that you want it to look.
And then I had a question as well.
Yeah.
You know, if there are many conservators out there who are working with museums during this particular time via Zoom or other measures to assist with condition surveys?
That is I don't really know. I'm sure that, I would hope that, conservators would be flexible about that and be open to those kinds of things. It's so hard to do an assessment. You can't see the object itself, but I would think that helping staff to get organized, review forms, just talk staff through all of those different aspects to answer questions about, what, or even knowing the information that you collect afterwards to help prioritize, yes, this risk is greater than this risk because of this information collected. I would think that our conservators out there I would definitely be, willing to help with that kind of thing. And I would expect there to be other conservators who are practiced in this who would be able to help with those kinds of things. Oops, you're still on mute.
Sorry. This came in. We'll have this as the last question of where were you trained in conservation?
Oh, yeah. I trained at the University of Delaware Winter program. And now is I'm in the Portland area in Oregon. So. Oops, you're still on.
Sorry, having a technical difficulty.
No problem.
There we go. Well, just wanted to thank you again, Samantha. And thank you to everyone who joined us today. We had over 150 people come in this morning, so that's just incredible to see the interest. Before we go, I wanted to announce our next 2 webinars. First, on December 10th, we'll be joined by Carolina Vinstra, a books and paper conservator in Washington State, who will speak with us about making exhibit and storage mounts for our rare book collections. And then on January 21st, we'll have Kathleen Daly of Portland, Oregon as well, discussing how to mount textiles for storage and display. We're extremely excited to be presenting those, and the registration for the December one will open tomorrow, so that will come out in our RCWR newsletter. If you're not a member of RCWR and you live in our 9-state region, please consider joining today. In addition to these webinar series that we're doing, when conditions permit, we will have in-person events again, but we also have our weekly jobs listing emails. We have our quarterly newsletters, and we provide stipends for regional and national conferences. Membership is only $15 a year, so if you're interested for more information, you can go to rcwr.org. And then I'm just going to leave us with a screen with both mine and Samantha's contact information here. If you have any further questions about today's event, whether the webinar format or the content, please do not hesitate to get in touch with us. Other than that, thank you again for joining us. Thank you again, Samantha, and we look forward to seeing everyone on December 10th. And happy Thanksgiving.